Welcome to the third webcast in the How to Get Published series for authors. The goal of this presentation is to provide advice about how to properly structure your article. Manuscripts contain many sections, and each one has a definite purpose. At the beginning are the title, abstract, and keywords, which all play important roles in allowing the article to be easily found, indexed, and advertised to potential readers. The main text of the article is summarized by the IMRAD acronym: Introduction, Methods, Results, and Discussion. This is where you must present your work and convey the main messages and findings effectively. The last group of sections bring up the end of the manuscript: the conclusion, acknowledgments, references, and supporting materials. But these are just artificial groupings and the order can change. Some journals request the discussion section to be combined with the conclusion or results, but others need it to be an independent section. There are also different arrangements for the order, so read the guide for authors for the specific criteria of your target journal. Determining the order of authors on a paper can vary by discipline and culture, but the general rule is that the first author is the person who actually conducts or supervises the data collection, analysis, presentation, and interpretation of the results, and also the person who usually puts together the paper for submission. The corresponding author can be the first author or sometimes is a senior author from the institution. Be consistent in how you write the authors' names here. You should always avoid ghost authorship, which means excluding authors who participated in the work, and gift authorship, which means including authors who didn't contribute to the work. There are certain characteristics of effective titles. They should attract the reader's attention, they should be specific and directly reflect the content of your manuscript, be informative but concise, and they should not include technical jargon and abbreviations. Use formal language. It's advisable to always discuss the title with your co-authors before submission. Remember, editors and reviewers don't like titles that make no sense or fail to represent the subject matter adequately. And maybe even more important, you want the appropriate audience to read your paper. If the title isn't accurate, the right people may not read it, and the community may be unaware of your work. This could lead to even lower citations than the paper deserves. Keywords are the labels or tags for your manuscript. Avoid words that have broad meaning. These should be specific enough to give someone a very quick idea about the content of your paper and are used by indexing and abstracting services. Use only abbreviations that are firmly established in the field of study, and check the guide for authors for specifics on which keywords should be used. The orange box shown here contains actual examples of keywords that are associated with two papers taken directly from ScienceDirect. If the title catches a reader's attention, the next thing they check is the abstract. This should be a single paragraph summarizing the problem, the method, the results, and the conclusions. The abstract acts as an advertisement for your article since it is freely available via online searching and indexing. You want to make it as catchy and as accurate as possible to have the greatest impact. An abstract written clearly will strongly encourage the reader to look through the rest of your paper. Many authors write the abstract last, so that it accurately reflects the contents of the paper. Take the time to write this very carefully. The introduction is used to provide context for your manuscript and convince readers why your work advances a field of study. You should be concise in the introduction, but give the reader enough information to understand why the work is important. Introductions of letter articles can be shorter, sometimes only one paragraph. This section shouldn't be a history lesson, but you do need to introduce the main scientific publications on which your work is based. Cite a couple of original and important works, including recent review articles, to give the reader a sense of how your work fits into the literature. But take care to not make references to irrelevant papers, including your own. Make sure you carefully address the following. What's the problem you're ultimately trying to solve? Are there any solutions? And if so, what's the best solution and what is its limitation? What is your work trying to achieve? Provide a perspective that is consistent with the journal where you're submitting. Though it can be tempting to reuse introductions from your previous papers on similar studies, every paper should present a new result, and the work should be specifically motivated. This requires a unique introduction every time. The methods section describes how you studied the problem. It's important to be detailed. A knowledgeable reader should be able to reproduce the experiment. Any previously published procedures should not be rewritten in detail. Those can be noted in the references or described in the supporting materials sections. Identify the equipment and materials used in experiments, along with their sources if there's a chance for variability of the quality of those items. If the work is computational or theoretical, here you can describe code, computational, or analytical methods. If your work involves experiments on humans or animals, it must follow applicable ethics standards. Approval of a local ethics committee is required and should always be specified at this point in the manuscript. However, even approval of a local ethics committee does not guarantee that the editors will also agree that the work was done in an acceptable manner. Moving on to the results section. This is where you describe the important results of your research. You should only present results that are essential to the discussion, which means that only data of primary importance should be shared. Data of secondary importance should be put in the supporting or supplementary materials section. But don't attempt to hide data in the hope of saving it for a later paper, or split the results of one project into many papers. This dilutes the effect of the work, results in lower quality papers, and you may lose evidence that would reinforce your conclusions. Use subheadings to keep results of the same type together. This will make it easier to review and read. Number these subsections for the convenience of internal cross-referencing, and decide on a logical order of the data that tells a clear story. You should highlight findings which further understanding in the field, or those that differ from previous findings, and explain any unexpected results. Illustrations, including figures and tables, are the most efficient way to present your results. Your data are the driving force of the paper. Therefore, your figures and illustrations are critical, and they should be used for essential data only. The legend of a figure should be brief, and it should contain sufficient explanatory details to explain the figure without the need to refer to the text. Use color only when necessary. If different line styles can clarify the meaning, then don't use color or other thrilling effects which could distract from the content and may not appear well when printed in black and white. Graphs are often used to compare experimental results with those of previous works or with calculated or theoretical values. Graphs should not appear crowded. Try to present at most 3 to 4 data sets per figure. Use well-selected scales, label the axes clearly, use different symbols so that one can quickly discriminate between data sets. Oftentimes, tables give the actual experimental results. Don't include long, boring tables unless absolutely necessary. Otherwise, put them in the supplementary material and make them as easy to read as possible. Finally, every photograph or image should be presented with a scale marker, and the resolution should be clear. The discussion is where you interpret what your results mean. This is the most important section of the article. It's where you get the chance to really sell your data. A huge number of manuscripts are rejected because the discussion is weak or only includes mere description of the results. Make sure that the discussion corresponds to and complements the results, but don't just repeat the results here. You should compare other published results with your own, and don't ignore work in disagreement with yours. Confront it and convince the reader that you're correct or better. Be careful to not use the following: statements that go beyond what the results can support. Non-specific statements, such as higher temperature or at a lower rate, use quantitative descriptions instead. Don't use or introduce new terms which were not already defined or mentioned in your paper. Speculations on possible interpretations are allowed, but these should be carefully explained and rooted in fact rather than imagination. If you need to revise the results or discussion, this may involve a lot of work and require further experiments, derivations, or simulations. Sometimes you may not be able to clarify your idea in words because some critical items have not been studied substantially. Make sure your message is complete before you start writing or submit. The conclusion is used to show how your work advances the field of study. It should be clear to help the reviewers and editors judge your work and its impact. It should provide clear justification for how your work advances the field. This can be achieved by indicating uses, extensions, or applications of the work. Don't just repeat the abstract here. The abstract and conclusion serve different purposes, although some of the same messages may be mentioned. Also, don't just list the experimental results here. Trivial restatements of your results are unacceptable in this section. You should suggest future experiments that would build on your work and point out any relevant experiments that may already be underway. The acknowledgement section is where you mention those who helped in the research but are not authors. This should be a single brief paragraph. Most often mentioned here are advisors, financial supporters or funders, proofreaders, typists, or suppliers who may have donated material. The reference list is where you cite the main scientific publications on which you based your work. Take note that there are now some society journals that also require a conflict of interest statement to be placed before the references section. Some tips for having a proper reference list are: do not include too many references, especially if they are only tangentially related to your work. Always ensure that you have fully absorbed and understood the material you're referencing, and don't just rely on reading excerpts or isolated sentences. Know what you're referencing. Avoid excessive self-citations or citations from a single region or institute. Finally, check the guide for authors to ensure the proper format. Presentation in the correct format is the responsibility of the author, not the editor. Make the editor's work easier and they'll appreciate the effort. To summarize, structuring your article properly will make the work clearer and it will have a greater impact in the field. Make sure that each section of the paper fulfills its purpose clearly and concisely. Your title and abstract advertise your work and attract people to read the full article. The discussion is where you can really showcase the importance of your results and explain how they advance understanding in your field. Thanks for tuning into this webcast about structuring your article. For more information or to watch other webcasts in the How to Get Published series, please visit our website.